everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily, but you can call me Ems, and welcome to a very exciting video. I'm actually super excited to get into, which is everything I read in 2022. This is going to be a long one because I actually read significantly more than my goal was, so get yourself a tankard of coffee and let's jump into it. And yes, I did make a PowerPoint. So this is everything I read in 2022 by me, Emily Donnelly. So my 2022 reading goal was 22 books. The idea was 22 in 2022. And in recent years, I've been finding reading more than 12 books kind of difficult. So I wanted to give myself a bit of a challenge, knowing that this 22 books would include some things like graphic novels, maybe audiobooks, maybe even poetry books, but also including things that are significantly longer. Like in the past couple of years, I was reading the Game of Thrones books, which are significantly longer than the average book that I'm going to read. So I decided to go for 22 books. And the total that I read was, up here, 44 books. That's nuts. I literally doubled my goal. And it is still, like, we're still technically in 2022 when I'm filming this. Like, I could finish another book. We'll see. I doubt it's going to happen, but it's a possibility. So by the numbers, fiction versus nonfiction, 27% of what I read was nonfiction books, and 73% of what I read was fiction books. Nonfiction for me includes anything like cookbooks, knitting books, actual, like what you think of for nonfiction, like self-help, biographies, all those sorts of things. Those are all kind of included in that bracket. As you can see, pretty much around 3/4 of my time is spent in fiction. I am very much a fantasy lover, so that is a lot of what I read. I am also very much a varied book reader when it comes to what kind of books am I reading, in the sense of physical books, audiobooks, and ebooks. I actually had a pretty even split this year. I had 39% of them being audiobooks, 36% being physical books, and 25% being ebooks. This past year, I did get my Kobo, so that number of ebooks is starting to climb because I'm really enjoying being able to change the font and text size and all that within my Kobo. I have the Clara HD, and I'm very much enjoying it, especially now that I put a pop socket on the back of it. It's much easier to hold. So let's talk a little bit about my star rating system, because you're going to notice a lot of 4 and 5 star ratings from me. And here is what my system is and why you're going to see that high of a rating most of the time. So the 5-star system, the reason I'm using that is because that is what they use on Goodreads, and Goodreads is the way that I track my reading. I find it very handy and easy, and also I like to look at reviews for books as well, so it's just a handy website to use for that. And they use a 5-star rating system, so I've just kind of kept myself to a 5-star rating system. So I rate based on my enjoyment of the book. 1 star being that it was awful, 2 stars being that it wasn't great, 3 stars was it being fine. Like, I still, I didn't have a bad time, but it wasn't anything to write home about. 4 star is that I liked it, and 5 star is that I really enjoyed it. So my star rating is not based on how good the book is from a literary standpoint, and it is incredibly subjective to my own experience. And my rating could be affected by my mood on the day that I finished the book, where I was mentally while reading the book in general, or just things that I like versus what other people might like. So, and the big thing is now I also do not start books that I know I will dislike. I am that person that will finish a book when I've started reading it, because I don't like adding things to the DNF shelf, which for those of you who are not in the booktube, book talk, bookstagram zone, that means did not finish. I very rarely don't finish a book. And if I have to slog through a book to finish it, you know that's going to get the 1 star. So, not fun. But I thought it was really helpful here to show you guys what my 5-star rating system is, because I do notice on Goodreads, a lot of people tend to not give 5 stars to a book, even if they really liked it. And I don't look at 5 stars as perfection. I look at it as my level of enjoyment. Of course, if it was in a 10 star system, or like a rating it out of 10, I think very few things would get a 10 from me. They'd probably be more like between 7 and 9. But because I'm out of school now and I'm just getting my reading mojo back and enjoying reading again as a hobby, I don't pick up a book that I know I'm not going to like. The only time that I really probably give a book less than 3 stars is if I'm like shocked at how much I didn't like it, you know? So let's talk about the books. And there's 44 of them, so remember, get your coffee. It's going to be a long one. The first book of the year, also this is in the order of books finished. Not necessarily the order I started reading them in, but the order that I finished them. So the first one is 3 Women a Wheel, a Victorian Cycling Club story by Sarah A. Chrisman. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I got this as a physical book from print on demand through Amazon. It was self-published by the author on Amazon. It's the 6th in the series, and it's about a cycling club in the Victorian era in the Washington Territory, because in this book, they are not yet a state. This story is about a cycling adventure that the women in the series go on together, because the previous book was about the men going on a bit of an adventure themselves. And this is my favorite in the series so far, mainly because I really like the women in the story, but it also introduces probably my favorite character in the story so far. Sarah Chrisman is an author. She actually pretty much lives the Victorian lifestyle all the time, wears Victorian clothes, is currently restoring a home to the way it would have been in the late Victorian or early Edwardian period. Very, very interesting stuff if you want to go check out her YouTube channel or check out her books. I very much enjoy them. And it's kind of fun looking at this story being told from somebody else who also really loves the time period. And I really love seeing all these characters come together. Sarah herself describes the series like a rose. It starts out very small and closed with very few characters. For example, the first book, First Wheel in Town, starts out with just 2 main characters. The 2 main characters being Kitty and the doctor of the town. So it starts out very, very small. There's some other side characters that we do see later on in the series introduced as well, but she focuses very much on Kitty and the doctor. So it starts out very small, but slowly blooms and blooms and blooms and becomes bigger and more well-rounded, with more characters and more people and places that they can delve into. So the first book is very short and very straightforward, and the further we're getting on in the series, the more complicated the stories are getting, the more in-depth we're getting into each character, and we're seeing more development of all the characters and the stories, as well as the area that they're in. So this is based in the fictional Chetzemoka, which is actually based on Port Townsend, Washington. It's named Chetzemoka because of Chief Chetzemoka, similar to how Seattle is named after Chief Seattle. So Chetzemoka was another chief, I believe contemporary with Chief Seattle. So she basically took the setting of Port Townsend and named it Chetzemoka. So definitely, probably, I'm going to say it right now, this was probably my favorite book I read all year, and it was the first book that I finished. Sorry about that. The next one is The Pagan Book of Living and Dying, Practical Rituals, Prayers, Blessings, and Meditations on Crossing Over by Starhawk and M. Matcha Nightmare. This one I also gave 5 stars to. This is a physical book that I own. It is a core reclaiming book. So reclaiming is a tradition of witchcraft that kind of started around the 70s in California. There are a couple of what we would call core books in reclaiming. They are all a bit older. Some of them are a bit outdated, but still, I find this one very, very helpful. It's a great piece on death and dying while pagan, as well as a selection of meditations, prayers, and stories about death and grief. And an important read for anyone in the reclaiming community or who is pagan, because there's not a lot of information out there on end-of-life care and death care in the pagan community, and I think that we need more books like this. Sorry for the typo, I just realized it says that we need more books like this. This one is a bit dated, but I still rate it 5 stars. This book definitely made me cry, but maybe not for the reason that you're thinking. So there was an elder in the reclaiming space named Rose May Dance, and I met Rose at a couple of witch camps, and I loved her. She was great, and she actually passed away she crossed over shortly before I started actually reading this book and properly getting through it. And there's a story in there about, from her, written by her, about her own grief and dealing with grief, and it made me cry because I was going through a bit of grief about losing her from our community. So that was definitely very impactful and powerful. If there are other reclaiming witches who have met Rose, I 1000% recommend reading that piece from her. The next one I read is actually Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, and believe it or not, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This was a physical book that I borrowed from the library. This was my first time actually reading it all the way through. I was in a reading group in 10th grade where we had to read Twilight, but the teacher was so bad that I ended up just tearing my copy in half. It was my personal copy that I owned. I literally tore it in half. I was from the spine. It was a, soft cover book. I was not happy with it. I was also very much already a bit of a snob in high school. I was a literary snob, and I'm like, girl, you got no training. What you being a snob about? So I wanted to approach this from a less critical literary lens, because that is the way I've always approached Twilight. I've always looked at it as, here's all the reasons it's bad, and la la la, and why you shouldn't read it, and all these things, and this is literarily bad, and this is not a good representation of a relationship, and all these very in-depth whatever things throughout when I was getting my literary degree, because I have a degree in literature and religious studies, and I was very much a snob about it, and I decided, you know what? Let's just approach this from a let teen girls like what they like. And I actually rather enjoyed it for what it is. It's, again, not the most amazing book in the world, but it is a fun YA fantasy. When you think of young adult fantasy books, you're not looking for the most literarily amazing, perfect book in the world. I think I was being a bit of a hipster about it before hipster was hipster when I was in high school, because this would have been grade 10. This would have been 2007 when the Twilight fan craze was starting, and I think I was being a bit of a hipster and just didn't want to like it because other people liked it. So in the end, I actually liked Twilight, and you could stop watching if you think that makes me a bad reader and that you don't want to listen to my opinions from here on out. I won't judge you. The next one, in a similar vein, is Vampire Knits, Projects to Keep You Knitting from Twilight to Dawn by Genevieve Miller. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I got it as an ebook on Kobo. This was recommended to me by Of Herbs and Altars here on YouTube. Thanks very much, Dorian, for the recommendation. This is knitwear inspired by the Twilight series and other vampire stories, including like Vampire Diaries and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, etc., etc. Lots of actually really fun projects and several accessories that I would actually like to make. This is getting only 4 stars for me because the wearables, like the non-accessory wearables, were not very size inclusive, and as you can see, I need a little bit more size inclusivity in my knitting books. This was very heavily skewed to Twilight, but overall very fun knits, and some that I think I actually will add to my to make pile list. Next one is the Vampire Lestat. If you can't tell already, this year was a bit of a vampire year for me. I got into a bit of a role. So this is the Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. This is a physical book that I own. I've actually owned it as a trade paperback for like forever. Like I've had it for years and just not read it yet. I enjoyed this one significantly more than I enjoyed Interview with the Vampire, and I thought I liked Interview with the Vampire, but wow, did I enjoy the Vampire Lestat significantly more. So Anne Rice actually died while I was reading this book because I started it in December of 2021, and she died in December of 2021, and I finished the book in February of 2022. Please note, I do keep multiple books on my currently reading shelf, so what you gonna do? Sometimes you take a little bit longer to finish a book. I found some parts were a bit slow, but my enjoyment stayed about the same throughout the whole book, and I think that this was a great representation of the loneliness that can come from with the life of a vampire, and the struggle for connection after the mortal death once you become immortal. I thought it was a very good commentary on that, and some good commentary and like perspective on grief as well. Very interesting, and I found I enjoyed the character of Lestat significantly more after this book. The next one is Cold Fire by Tamora Pierce, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. This was an ebook on Kobo. This is from the Circle Opens Quartet. This is book number 3. I found this one started very slowly and took me a long while to properly get into it. I actually started it early 2021 and shelved it for a while and then came back to it in 2022. And I ended up liking the book. However, I think that the first quartet, The Circle of Magic, is better than the second quartet, The Circle Opens, in my opinion. Like, even reading Magic Steps, and I think it's Magic Steps, and I forget the other one that has Briar in it, but yeah, I'm not enjoying them as much as the first quartet. I really like the first quartet, so I'm a little bit disappointed by this quartet, but overall, still 4 out of 5 stars. I still liked it. Next is being Advanced Candle Magic, More Spells or Rituals for Every Purpose. That's because this is the second book by Raymond Buckland on candle magic, the first one just being Candle Magic, which I've actually not read the first one. However, my good friend Willow Moonlight has read it and recommends the second one more than the first. So this is a physical book that I own. I really loved this book. I think it is a very valuable resource for any pagan or witch who is interested in working with candle magic. While the actual individual spells that are present in the book may not be the ones that I want to conduct, but their format and the information provided regarding colors, spell timing, the elements of advanced candle magic in general, I think this will be indispensable in making my own future spell work. I think that this was a really great way to look at more in-depth magic. I will say it's very formal in the way that it is done in this book. However, there are some times when I find formality and theater very important to my magic. And I think this is a great book for introducing that. This also changed the way that I approach my spell work. It actually makes me think more about what I want to do before I do it and put more effort in before the spell. And I think that it is making things better and more affecting my mind more. I don't know. But yes, this was recommended by my good friend Willow Moonlight. She hasn't posted on YouTube in a long time, but you can check out her YouTube channel. So go give it a check. The next one is Sparks Press, a Victorian Cycling Club story by Sarah A. Chrisman. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I got this as an ebook on Kindle. I don't actually have a Kindle, but because she self-publishes on Amazon, it's not available on Kobo. So I read this one on my iPad. It is the 7th in the series and is currently the most recent addition to the series. I love seeing more of Felix come out in this story, as well as the lovely young girl who was introduced in Delivery Delayed. Seeing her grow up and come more into herself has been really nice to see. I added this to my list of books that made me cry, which is actually a small list and not an easy feat to make me cry when reading a book. Maybe sometime I'll make a video about the list of books that made me cry. We'll see. This by far is the best in the series. Like from an objective standpoint, I guess. I think this is the best one in the series. However, my personal favorite is still book number 6. Still my personal favorite. The next one is Reclaiming Witchcraft by Iris Anya Moon, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I got this as an ebook on Kobo. This is a great primer on modern Reclaiming Witchcraft. This is probably one of the most recent books specifically about and for Reclaiming Witchcraft. And I think it is a must-read for all people in the Reclaiming tradition. It's an amazing primer on the leadership structure and how our tradition works, and great insight and information on, like, for anybody that wants to start their own community in the tradition, or who wants to maybe convert an already existing community into the Reclaiming tradition, that sort of thing. And I had the great honor this year of taking the Communities Core class with Iris Anya this year as well. And I don't think I can recommend this one enough. It's so good. If you're interested in Reclaiming Witchcraft or are in it and want to know more about how leadership is structured, give it a good old read. The next one is New Moon by Stephanie Meyer. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I got it as an ebook from the library through, I believe it's called Libby, or OneDrive, or Overdrive, whatever it's called. Overdrive? I think it's Overdrive. This one is where you finally start to see where the whole Jacob versus Edward business is coming from. Like all that stuff that I saw when I was in high school, all the like Team Edward, Team Jacob, la la la. I still don't really understand it because reading the books, I don't like Jacob that much. So maybe that makes me Team Edward, I guess. But yeah, I'm starting to understand where that all came from. After reading Twilight, I was talking to my friend Cameron and I was like, I don't get it. But I get it now. Okay. I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first one, but I still liked it, so it still gets 4 stars. And this book is definitely starting to solidify my headcanon that Bella is autistic or somehow neurodivergent. Just the way that she's written gives me those vibes, especially where, like, Edward can't read her mind and things like that. I'm just like, neurodivergence. This screams of neurodivergence right here. The next one is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Of course I gave this a 5 out of 5. This was an audiobook on Audible. One of my favorite stories of all time. Definitely not the first time that I have read it, and I was obsessed with this book in middle and high school, as well as a little bit in elementary school. But yeah, I got even more into it in university when I was taking literature and learned more about these subtexts in the book, like political commentary and all that, and that made me enjoy it even more. And I actually listened to this as an audiobook before bed like kind of like a bedtime story for a few weeks, and I would just set the sleep timer to the end of the chapter, or even like 30 minutes, and that was really fun. It was actually narrated by Scarlett Johansson, and it was very well done, I think. The next one is How to Behave Badly in Elizabethan England. On Goodreads, this is actually labeled as How to Behave Badly in Renaissance England, but as you can clearly see from the audiobook cover, it's Elizabethan England. This is by Ruth Goodman. I could not fit the subtitle in here. So the subtitle is A Guide for Knaves, Fools, Harlots, Cuckolds, Drunkards, Liars, Thieves, and Braggarts. So this was an audiobook. I definitely was disappointed in this book because I love Ruth Goodman. Like, I love Ruth Goodman. But I found this one very hard to listen to, and I would frequently need to rewind, like, or skip back, like the 15-second skip back, because I would miss stuff from drifting off mentally. It was quite funny in places, but very difficult experience and really, you know, kind of dragged, and that does drag down the rating a bit. I think if maybe I wasn't in the right headspace for this book, and usually I really enjoy her history books, and so that's kind of why I was a little disappointed in this one. The next one I listened to was The Secret Garden by Hodgson Burnett. This was an audiobook, and I loved Carrie Hope Fletcher as the narrator in the audiobook, the Audible original one. Oh my gosh, this one got me. Like, I love Carrie, first of all. I've been following Carrie's YouTube channel since before she was on the West End. Well, modern on the West End. Obviously, she acted when she was a child, but before she was on the West End again. And yeah, just so good. This was my first time actually reading the book, despite loving the movie when I was a kid, and I really liked hearing the growth of Mary throughout the book and how it slowly built up and added on itself and added on itself. This was another one that I listened to as kind of a bedtime story way, you know. Back to the vampires. It's The Vampire Knitting Club by Nancy Warren. Buckle yourselves up because there's going to be a lot of this series in this video. This one I gave 5 out of 5 stars. It was an audiobook. I listened to this for the Haunted Audio Book Club from Altnots, who's a fellow YouTuber. She does crochet videos primarily and runs an audiobook club every month. And this was one of the ones for 2022. So Sarah Zimmerman is the narrator, and I think she was great for this audiobook, and I think she's actually a very good audiobook narrator. I would probably actually seek out other books that she narrates. It was that good. It's a really great, cozy mystery to listen to while knitting and crafting. This is book 1 in the series, and if you like cozy vibes, vampires, and witches, you should give it a go. It's pretty fun. Each book is only about 4 to 6 hours in length, so it's perfect for popping on while knitting, crocheting, whatever you do with your hands. It's a good time. Next one is Eclipse by Stephanie Meyer. I actually gave this a 5 out of 5. It was an ebook that I borrowed from the library, and surprisingly, really enjoyed this one. It feels very freeing to release myself from the literary mindset I was in high school and university, where I didn't like bad books because they were super teenager unrealistic. But surprise, surprise, YA fantasy is not intended to be realistic or the best book in the entire world. You can still really enjoy something even when it's not objectively good. The next one is The Tunisian Crochet Handbook, A Beginner's Guide by Toni Lipsey. 5 out of 5 stars. This was an ebook I actually got on iBooks because for some reason it had a bit of a sale or was a little bit cheaper on iBooks, and I wanted to see it in full color, but I couldn't afford the hardcover book at the time. So I had never done Tunisian crochet and decided to try it and learn from this book, and it worked. I actually learned and made a lot of swatches of all the stitches taught in the book, and it actually worked. I was like, what do you mean I can learn that's not from a video or from an actual class? Really well written. The only stitch I had trouble with was the chevron, and I think it's because I wasn't making a big enough swatch that it ended up a little askew. I think I could get it if I did like a full-size project with the chevron stitch, but overall, pretty good at teaching me how to Tunisian crochet. I haven't finished any of the projects from this book, but I do plan to try out maybe a blanket in the coming year. We'll see. So Tony has a YouTube channel all about crochet and yarn, which is called TL Yarn Crafts. I love her channel, and I recommend if you're a crocheter or want to learn how to crochet. Stitches and Witches by Nancy Warren. 5 out of 5 stars audiobook. This is number 2 in the Vampire Knitting Club series. I enjoyed getting more into the witchcraft side of the series and enjoyed hearing more about the ladies who own the tea shop next door. Crochet and Cauldrons by Nancy Warren. 4 out of 5 stars. Audiobook, number 3 in the series. Overall, not as good as the other books in the series, but enjoyed the introduction to Mary, or Maritamun, without getting too spoilery. Fuck Margaret Twig. I don't know if that's how you spell her name because I listened to the audiobook, but fuck Margaret Twig. Rude. Stockings and Spells by Nancy Warren. 4 out of 5 stars. Audiobook, number 4 in the series. I found this one started a bit slower and wrapped up too quickly compared to the others in the series, and I think I would have enjoyed this book more had I listened to it during the Christmas season, but I wanted to listen to the books in order, so I listened to this one probably like in the middle of summer, so it wasn't as cozy and fun, because it was like based in a Christmas market in Oxford, and not exactly what you want to listen to when it's like plus 32 outside. Breaking Dawn by Stephanie Meyer. 4 out of 5 stars. Ebook from the library. I found the section from Jacob's perspective really hard to read, and I didn't enjoy the ending as much as I wanted to enjoy it. I think had there not been the perspective shift to Jacob, I would have enjoyed it more. Bordering between 3 and 4 stars, but ultimately I did still like it, so I'm giving it 4 stars. I don't think it was quite in the it's fine category, which is what I put at 3 stars, so 4 out of 5 stars. Pearls and Potions by Nancy Warren. 5 out of 5 stars. Audiobook, number 5 in the series. The love spell gone wrong theme was actually really funny. Like, that tends to be kind of something that if you got witches in a story, you're gonna have the love spell gone wrong. It actually ended up being really funny and more catastrophic than it usually turns out. And I loved the character of Alice, and I was gonna say here, I hope we see her more in the future. We do. I know we do. I've already read significantly more in the series. I know we do. So, loved the character of Alice. I hope that she plays a little bit bigger role in coming books, but we'll see. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Long Way Home by Joss Whedon with I'm going to say it's Jules Janty because it's not Georges, so I'm guessing he's French. So Jules was the artist. 4 out of 5 stars. This was a physical book I got at the library. So this is season 8, book 1. After finally watching all of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in 2021, it was really fun to read the canon series 8 comics. So after the end of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they actually created some comic series, I believe season 8, 9, and 10, that are all considered canon in the Buffy universe. I found the cold opens in the stories a bit confusing, but it very much followed the format of the show, so you kind of got used to it, and I really love the art style. Like, it is gorgeous. I think Jules did a great job. The next book was Poisoned, by Jennifer Donnelly. 2 out of 5 stars. This was probably, I think this is the lowest rated book of the year for me. This was a physical book from the library, and I was inspired by a summer reading challenge to choose an author with my last name. So technically the summer reading challenge was to choose an author with your initials, but I couldn't really find anything that was ED for an author. But I did find Jennifer Donnelly, and I was like, close enough, it's my same last name, let's give it a shot. And I was actually really shocked at how much I did not like this book. The writing style was honestly not great, and found the character to be very, very annoying. The author tried to line up a lot of quotable quotes, like things that you'd see on the back of the book, or people quoting all the time, and really hammered the moral of the story really, really hard all the time. Like, she kind of hammered it down within like the first couple of chapters, and continued to hammer it and hammer it and hammer it and beat that dead horse into its grave. Like, it was just, it wasn't absolutely awful. It wasn't the worst book I've ever read in my life, but it was pretty bad, so I don't recommend this book. Apparently that's kind of the general consensus about this. A lot of people like Jennifer Donnelly's previous retelling of a different story. So this was a retelling of not Sleeping Beauty, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It was a retelling of Snow White, and it was bad. But she apparently previously retold a different story, and it was actually apparently very good. But because of this book, I don't think I'm willing to dedicate the time to try anything else that Jennifer Donnelly writes. I'm sorry. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, No Future for You. This one was written by Brian K. Vaughan with Joss Whedon as well. And then, of course, the same artist, Jules Gianti. This one is 4 out of 5 stars. It was a physical book from the library. It is season 8, book 2. And I'm continuously feeling bad for Faith. I kind of feel like her character has really been fitted into this, like, anti-hero archetype, and that she kind of gets the shit end of the stick all the time. And it's a bit old. I'm not gonna lie. So, 4 out of 5 stars. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Wolves at the Gate by Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon, with, again, Jules Gianti as the artist. 4 out of 5 stars. This is a physical book from the library. Season 8, book 3. I loved seeing more of Dracula and his hold of Xander. Harkening back to past episodes of the show, I really like when they kind of bring back things that were done previously and say, oh yeah, by the way, this still is a thing. The next one is Fair Isle and Fortunes by Nancy Warren, 4 out of 5 stars, audiobook, number 6 in the series. Something I didn't realize in this book is that Lucy's age is retcon, saying that it is her 26th birthday, when previously we are told that she is 27, and this is according to several reviews. Now, it is possible that this was fixed in the audiobook and that I didn't notice, because the future book, I know it's her 29th birthday. So it's possibly a typo and meant to be 28. Yeah, so it's possibly a typo there. I did look at some of the other reviews on Goodreads, and apparently the Kindle edition was fixed to say 28, but for a long time it did say 26. So I think that's what happened there. Mrs. Beeton's Book of Household Management, the 1861 classic with advice on cooking, cleaning, child rearing, entertaining, and more, by Isabella Beeton, with the foreword by Sarah A. Chrisman. 4 out of 5 stars. This is a physical book that I own. This is an abridged edition of the original. I will note the original is like over 1,000 pages and very dense. But this is a great peek. I don't know if I spelled the right peek there. I'm sorry. But this is a great peek into the everyday lives of people in the past. It's a great selection of how to run a household, how much people should be paid, and recipes from the era. I would like to obtain a full copy someday, but having this abridged version was a really nice taste and looking into it. I think that it would be really fun to try and veganize some of the recipes that are in it. Might be a fun video. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Time of Your Life by Joss Whedon and Joel Gianti, artist, and Jeff Lieb. 4 out of 5 stars. This is a physical book that I got from the library. Season 8, Book 4. While I liked the book, I sort of lost interest in the graphic novel series after this one. I found the dystopian future storyline hard to follow, and the futuristic slang very annoying while reading. It's similar to A Clockwork Orange. I don't know. I liked A Clockwork Orange, but just the futuristic slang is weird and kind of takes me out of the book, which is funny because I think it's supposed to like immerse you more into the world, but it just felt weird. Oh, Heroes Feast, the official D&D cookbook. By Kyle Newman, John Peterson, Michael Whitwer, Adam Reed, and with Ray Kachatourian as the photographer. 5 out of 5 stars. Probably one of my favorite books of the year. I know I previously said that about 3 Women a Wheel, but like, I mean, is good. How can I put it any other way? It is a physical book that I own. Every D&D player who loves to cook should own this book. The flavor text, I said lol, but you know, the flavor text was super fun and in lore, really fun. The recipes are broken up by types of cuisines such as dwarven, human, elven, and then there's like a section that includes like orc and goblin and the underdark and all that. I made a veganized version of the tavern steaks and they were freaking delicious. Some pictures coming up here. Gorgeous art and photography, like D&D like source book style art, along with the gorgeous photography by Ray Kachatourian. So good. And some great drinks. There's literally a mixed drink called the Mind Flayer. Hello? So good, so fun. I definitely want to make more things from this book. Ginny D here on YouTube as well has made a couple of recipes from this book, but so good. So these are my tavern steaks. You can see the book photo versus my version. You can clearly tell I tried to make the photo similar to the photo in the book. And this was freaking delicious. So literally all I did was, instead of normal plain yogurt, I did vegan plain yogurt. Instead of meat, I used either Impossible ground or Beyond Meat ground. I forget which one it was. It was whatever was on sale that day. Really freaking delicious. Like with the 2 spreads. Oh my god. I don't like, that's like an olive fig tapenade with like this dill delicious yumminess sauce. So good. I have to make these again. They were worth the time. Next one, a bit of a left turn here, is Fruits Basket Volume 1 by Natsuki Takaya. This is 4 out of 5 stars. It is a physical book that I own because a friend actually gave me, I think it's the first 13 in the series, for free. So thank you. I was expecting to like this more because I enjoyed the anime, but I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. It was slightly better than fine, but I found it a bit odd. I can't put my finger on why, but it could have to do with the fact that I haven't read manga in a long time, and I actually kind of struggled with the flow of the panels. And I don't know if that's because I'm not used to manga and reading right to left anymore, or if that's that the panels are actually poorly laid out. I don't know. If anyone is a manga fan and has read Fruits Basket Volume 1, let me know in the comments what you think on that. Japanese Knitting Stitch Bible, 260 Exquisite Patterns by Hitomi Shida. This was translated into English. This is 4 to 5 stars. I got it as an ebook on Kindle. It is a great resource for pattern designers. It includes only charts, not written patterns for stitch patterns, because Japanese knitting is actually done entirely by chart. So there's no written pattern for Japanese knitting, which is really good because that means that Japanese knitting patterns, as long as you know what the individual symbols are and how to read knitting charts, you don't have to speak Japanese to use them. So that's really good in that sense. I would not say that this is for your average knitter who just likes to knit from a pattern without designing themselves. But the actual stitch patterns themselves have gorgeous, gorgeous details, a great use of texture, really nice, fun use of cables and lace stitches and things like that. If you are a pattern designer or plan to be a pattern designer, like me, I would like to design my own patterns, I really recommend getting this book as well as any other Japanese knitting stitch Bibles. 1000%. You gotta have one. The reason I labeled it only 4 out of 5 stars is because I don't think it would be appropriate for every knitter. This does not contain any actual patterns in the sense of no actual wearable, but rather it is repeatable patterns that you can add in to a design. Lace and Lies by Nancy Warren, 5 out of 5 stars. Audiobook, number 7 in the series. I really enjoyed the character of Teddy Lamont, and bringing in the view of a famous knit designer. It really reminded me, like, of the way people talk about Stephen West as a designer, and, like, the way people react to him, of that, if you're not a knitter, you don't know who the fuck that is. But if you are a knitter, you're like, oh, Stephen West. Oh my God, Stephen West. Yes, he's so great, Stephen West. Like, it gives me that, like, niche celebrity vibes. And I enjoyed a lot seeing Lucy actually doing some knitting and improving her skills, even a little bit. She could still be a bad knitter, but it was starting to get a little annoying by this time in the series of her just being like, I can't knit, I can't knit, I can't knit. But now you actually see her trying. And it's because the character of Teddy Lamont's kind of, he's a lace knitter designer, like he's a lace knitwear designer. And his approach to lace is not perfection, but character and just enjoying your time. And that really gets Lucy into it. And from now on in the series, we do see Lucy actually trying to knit, actually taking patterns and working on them. Yes, she has to get the vampires to help her fix them frequently, but she is actually trying and improving. And I like to see that. Baubles and Broomsticks by Nancy Warren, audiobook, number 8 in the series, 4 out of 5 stars. Poor Alice. That is like the most terrible thing to happen on your wedding day. I'm not going to do any spoilers. I know it's early in the book, but I'm not going to do any spoilers about what happens or why it happens, blah, blah, blah. Lucy trying to ride a broom was quite funny. And for some reason, Goodreads does not have the audiobook cover as of yet, so I had to pull the just like normal book cover. I also want to say I really like the book covers of this series. It is very like romance novel style covers, but I actually like them because it's like she's always got this really nice knitwear on, usually related to the story. So for example, she's wearing a sweater with baubles on it, and it's called Baubles and Broomsticks. And you kind of see like an old college building behind her and things like that. Kind of fun. The next book I read was Bridgerton, The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. 5 out of 5 stars. This is physical. I own this book. I was genuinely surprised by how much I enjoyed this book. It is the first time I have actually really enjoyed what would be referred to as a romance novel, so to speak. Like, for example, a lot of the Victorian Cycling Club books are a romance, but they don't have that vibe of romance. They're more of a historical fiction than they are a romance. And I've tried reading romance in the past and haven't really enjoyed it, but this historical romance, the way it's written, I really liked. And I don't know if it's because it was more slow build up into it, It wasn't very explicit in the sex scenes. There are sex scenes, as a warning. There are sex scenes similar to the TV show, but it wasn't like extremely explicit like some like erotica romance can be. And it wasn't so, oh, abadoo, as a romance book. Excuse me. I was being dramatic. Can you calm down? And like, I get it. People like romance. I didn't give myself, excuse me. And I get it. People like romance. I didn't think of myself as a romance lover, but I think this book may have converted me, at least to historical romance. Please note, this book focuses almost entirely on Daphne and Simon, unlike the show where it spans across like a whole cast of characters from all the books. But I did enjoy actually going deeper into these two characters rather than being focused on so many characters. I actually got to see their characters blossom more and their relationship build up a little bit more slowly. Him struggle. Him gotta struggle. Him struggle right there. Oh, him have a hard time. 'Cause him just a baby. Yeah. So stop barking and leave your mama alone, please. Popcorn and Poltergeist by Nancy Warren. 5 out of 5 stars. Audiobook, number 9 in the series. And for some reason, the Goodreads audiobook cover is weirdly squished. Like, you can tell it was meant to be a square, but it isn't. And I tried fixing it in PowerPoint, and it ended up looking weird. So, I really liked this book in the series. It was super cozy, having the secondary location being an old library in Oxford. Usually it's pretty cozy as well because, like, the main setting is the knitting shop. But, like, this was, like, curl up on the couch with your hot cocoa and your knitting and your audiobook. Just, it was good. I found myself genuinely surprised by the ending, and usually in these books I can guess who the killer is before it's revealed, but I was actually like, you gotta be kidding me. So, Cat's Paws and Curses by Nancy Warren, 4 out of 5 stars, an audiobook. This is actually number 8.5 in the series. It's a mini novella that takes place during Lucy's second Christmas in Oxford, between books 8 and 9. It's very short, but an enjoyable whodunit style in a single location, all without leaving the knitting shop back room. It's a fun one for those... English. It's a fun one for those of us with our own deduction skills, not one deduction skills. While listening, you can kind of start piecing things together and trying to figure it out. And I found that actually a really fun part. It reminded me a little bit of watching an episode of like Murder, She Wrote or something. Garters and Gargoyles by Nancy Warren, 3 out of 5 stars. Audiobook, number 10 in the series. I sincerely hope this will be the lowest rating I give a book in this series because it started so strongly for me. I was very disappointed in this book compared to the others in the series, but I still liked it enough to give it 3 stars. I liked getting an introduction to Rafe's best friend, who we will see more of in future books, I'm sure, because I am currently listening to one, and he is a bit of a character in that one. The next one is Literary Knits, 30 Patterns Inspired by Favorite Books by Nicole Lore. 3 out of 5 stars. This was an ebook I borrowed from the library. It is not size inclusive at all. It is a very narrow size range, which knocked this down a whole star. The pattern editing was a bit odd. It's not my favorite style of pattern writing, but it was still pretty okay. Some really pretty patterns, and I expect I will make some of the accessories where sizing is not really an issue, but this would have been 4 out of 5 stars, but that size range was awful. So 3 out of 5. Diamonds and Daggers by Nancy Warren, 4 out of 5 stars. Audiobook, number 11 in the series. I find the way that they incorporate actual pagan/Wiccan tools and concepts into a fantasy setting very interesting. Specifically, in this book, Lucy gets her athame to cut truth from lies. She does seem to use it a little bit more in the way that a witch in real life might use her wand, minus the, like, fantastical side of fantasy book magic, like she points her dagger to light a candle or things like that. So she'll point her athame to light a candle versus we might use it to cast the circle or other such things. But a lot of what she does, I would use more of my wand rather than my athame. But of course, the wand and athame can be quite interchangeable tools in a sense that they both direct energy. But there's a different vibe. Unless you've, like, worked with it, you don't really know what I mean by it's a different vibe, but it is a different vibe. Inside a Witch's Coven by Adaine McCoy, 4 out of 5 stars. This is a physical book that I borrowed. While this book is a bit outdated, it was published in 2003 with a lot of reference to the early to mid-90s. It still contains a lot of helpful information on coven structure and the creation of community. I found the conflict resolution information very helpful. This book, coupled with the Communities Reclaiming core class that I took with Iris, Anya, Moon, and Yule, was immensely helpful for me this year. This is definitely a good read, and I recommend it for a lot of people, but it is outdated, and I think there are newer books that serve a similar purpose, but if you can get your hands on it from, like, a secondhand bookshop, give it a read. The Golden Compass by Philip Pullman, 4 out of 5 stars. This is an audiobook. I really enjoyed the audiobook as it was a casted book with different narrators for each different character, and Philip Pullman himself as the main narrator, so it was actually very fun to hear him speak his own words. I tried to read this book in high school and found it very dense and complicated at the time. I did read it, so I did finish it, but it was very much a slog and very difficult. But now having a literature and religious studies degree, I find it easier to digest and can pick out the story more, as well as the commentary on religion that the author has throughout the book and throughout the series. Raven Goddess, Going Deeper with the Morrigan by Morgan Daimler, 4 out of 5 stars. This was an ebook I got on Kobo. Morgan Daimler's second Pagan Portals book about the Morrigan. For those of you who don't know, Pagan Portals books are smaller, maybe chapbook-sized books on a whole variety of different subjects within the pagan and Wiccan communities. And they kind of have a little something for everyone. They're a bit less expensive, and they're a great way to dip your toes into a subject. But this is the second book on the Morrigan from Pagan Portals. I found it to be more scholarly work about the Morrigan and her many faces and stories. And I found it less about deepening your relationship with the Morrigan and more about going in depth with the series and the actual lore we have on the Morrigan. So the title was a little misleading for me. I didn't really find it about deepening your relationship, which, to be fair, is not what it says, but going deeper with the Morrigan makes me think deepening relationship, but that's not what it was. I would recommend reading the first Pagan Portals book on the Morrigan before tackling this one, but any follower of the Morrigan, like myself, should give this one a read. I think it's really, really helpful to sift through the actual stories about her and dispelling a lot of the myths from fact. So, Herringbones and Hexes by Nancy Warren, 4 out of 5 stars. The audiobook, number 12 in the series. I like seeing Lucy branching out into trying to build more relationships, but the introduction of a new character only for them to be murdered soon after is a bit annoying. But I guess that is the life of a murder mystery series. Somebody's got to die in every book, and it can't be the main characters. Like, you can't just kill off main characters, so Gotta be somebody else. There were a lot of funny portions in this book and some genuinely worrying portions where I could not stop listening because I wanted to know what would happen next. But overall, I just liked it. It wasn't the best in the series and it wasn't the worst in the series. And finally, my last book that I finished this year is Make, Sew, and Mend: Traditional Techniques to Sustainably Maintain and Refashion Your Clothes by Bernadette Banner. 5 out of 5 stars. This is a physical copy that I own. This is the book I wish I had when I was relearning how to sew, which I was relearning how to sew in like 2018, 2019. However, after watching a lot of Bernadette's channel and much research into sewing techniques on my own, I don't need this book as much anymore. However, I think this is very much a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to learn to sew by hand. I will note it's not a sewing pattern book, but a primer on tools and tricks of the trade and actual technique. So I think this is a great first step towards a sewing journey, and I think it's a good one to have in your arsenal in case you forget how to perform any stitches, or if you want to get better at hand stitching, like maybe if you've been a machine sewer all your life and you want to get better at handwork, this is a great book for that. Still 5 out of 5 stars, even though it was not as helpful to me. I think it would be helpful to a lot of people. Excuse me. That's rude. I hate you. Oh, Angie. Oh, nasty bean. Other stats, because I like stats. My shortest versus longest book. The shortest book was Cat's Paws and Curses, the Vampire Knitting Club novella, which was 1 hour and 38 minutes on Audible. And then the longest one was Breaking Dawn at 756 pages. This was kind of hard to decide which one was actually shortest and longest. This is what Goodreads told me was shortest and longest, and I did agree. Because when it comes to, audiobooks, I didn't read anything that would be longer than 756 pages, if physical. And Cat's Paws and Curses was definitely the shortest audiobook I listened to. So I would agree with these as my shortest versus longest book. And then this one I just thought was a really interesting stat, which is the most versus least shelved on Goodreads. So Twilight was the most shelved with 7,567,181 other people who have put this on their shelves. And the least shelved being Sparks Press at one other person. That's a travesty. To be fair, Sarah A. Chrisman does self-publish her books on Amazon, and so you're not going to just come across them in a bookshop. You're not just going to pick it up. It's not like the world's next most popular series in the world, but I really like the series. And I can understand why people aren't shelving it as much, because you kind of need to read the other books to understand the characters. But if you like the Victorian era and you like something that's in the easy reading category, you really should pick up the Victorian Cycling Club series. Like the Tales of Chetzamoka, you gotta do it. And let's talk a little bit about my currently reading shelf, because there are books that I've started this year that I definitely won't finish before the end of the year, but I want to talk about them anyway. So this is my currently reading shelf. I'm sorry I'm covering up a bit of the words there, but I don't want to fix it. So my currently reading shelf, I have True Ladies and Proper Gentlemen, Victorian Etiquette for Modern Day Mothers and Fathers, Husbands and Wives, Boys and Girls, Teachers and Students, and more, by Sarah A. Chrisman. So this is actually a collection of period pieces from several books on etiquette and etiquette portions of magazines such as The Delineator, etc. So it's a lot of great in-period pieces on etiquette, and it's specifically things that Sarah thought could be applicable to the modern day. And I think it's a great way to show that people of the past were dealing with very similar problems as we are today. I will say, because it is period pieces, it's very man, woman, husband, wife, la 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 la. Obviously, is the Victorian era. It's not going to be inclusive in the gender and sexuality sphere. but I think it's really interesting advice on etiquette and the way people would, not would have acted, but the way people were told they should act in period, because I think that does affect the way they act. Even if they don't act in this way, you know that that is considered not the etiquette of the day. I think this is super, super interesting and definitely something I'm very interested in. So I'm enjoying that so far. I'm about 30-ish% of the way through it right now. I'm also reading Legends and Lattes. It's a novel of high fantasy and low stakes by Travis Baldree. It is about an orc who retires from adventuring, similar to a D&D campaign kind of thing. So retires from adventuring and decides to open up a coffee shop. And it's super cozy and fun, and I just am enjoying it a lot. I'm also about a third of the way through it. The next one I'm reading currently is Unmasking Autism by Devin Price. This one is a hard read for me because I'm currently going through the process of seeking an autism diagnosis. And by seeking, I don't mean that I want to have one. I mean, I know that I match up with a lot of autistic traits, and I want to know if they are considered clinically significant enough. And in the meantime, I'm doing a lot of reading about autism and the way it affects people, especially later diagnosed adults. And this book is very hard to read because I'm seeing myself being reflected back at me in such a painful way that I have cried a couple of times, even in the first chapter. So I'm working through it a little bit slowly, but so far it's a pretty good read. I would say it's geared towards autistic adults and less so towards their friends and family or caregivers. This is like about and for those who are autistic or neurodivergent. The next one is The Witch's Path, Advancing Your Craft at Every Level by Thorn Mooney. I'm not very far into this, about a quarter of the way, and we'll see how I feel about it as we go on through it. And last but certainly not least, and not at all surprising, is Ribbing in Runes, the 13th book in the Vampire Knitting Club series. The 14th book was actually recently released, but is not available on Audible yet, so we'll see when the audiobook comes out. But I am currently listening to that one. So let's talk a bit about my reading goal for 2023. I'm going to set it again at 23 books for 2023, as I did 22 for 2022. Yes, I did double my goal this year and did 44 books, but I don't want to set my goal too high and make it unachievable, because there have been times where getting to 20 books, like I did 20 books for 2020, and I found that difficult to meet. So I want to be more realistic, even though, yes, I did read a lot of books this year because of the Vampire Knitting Club series. I don't know if I'm going to find another series that's going to keep me as hooked and be something that I can listen to while working, while knitting, etc. I don't know about that. So the goal I'm setting for myself for 2023 is 23 books. Thank you very much. I have been Emily Donnelly. You can find me at EmsIsFab all over the internet, including here on YouTube, on Instagram. I deleted Twitter. And that's my link to Goodreads if you want to add me as a Goodreads friend. I'm user number 5632333-Emily-Donnelly. Have a good day, guys. I love you, love you, love you lots. Bye. Have a good day and happy reading.